What's up, guys? It's the Bad Wolf. Once again, your international man of mysteries and the man in black. Let's get on it. I want to thank everybody for reaching out to me. Today is actually the first day of my vacation. Yet here I am in the wolf den, still making these videos. I got that addiction to the law. Oh, speaking of which, I'm kind of funny. So a lot of people, if you guys don't know this, I do know a lot of police officers. My former next door neighbor, he's retired now, but he was an officer. He knows exactly what I'm doing. He just laughs. He's like, "Yeah, well, if you know the law, hey, what it is." So that being the case, I've also heard that they have a little term out there called the YouTube lawyer. Oh, you must be watching YouTube. You're one of them YouTube lawyers, which I find hilarious. Now, I will agree that there are some people out there, guys, you should be careful with when getting their information. Hell, I'll even say it, vet my information. That's something you're not going to hear from somebody out there doing scams because they don't want you to look too closely to what they're doing. So if you are not sure, look up the information. If someone's charging you a lot of money, it's probably a scam. Somebody doesn't want you to look too closely at them. They hide their face with glasses and it's all cloak and dagger and probably a scammer. They don't use their real name. C Lovett. Probably a scammer. These things just make sense, guys. There is a real thing out there called the law, and there are multiple laws out there, but the first law is God's law. Underneath that is natural, private, contract, religious, okay? And then man-made law, the government, the Constitution, what we put into place. Subservient to that is the minor laws, which are the laws of the states. Now, the states could have been completely sovereign, but what they did was is they wanted to be all a family, so they gave up a percentage of their sovereignty. So the states are not completely sovereign, though generally they operate in a sovereign capacity over their members called the public. Huzzah. It's really not that hard. So what I teach you guys here, which is why some of the police out there want to say, oh, YouTube lawyers. Okay. I'm sure I was included in that because that's just how it works. It's understanding that they spend 9 months becoming a police officer. That's it. And they are not taught the law. They are taught code for their municipality, for their members, for the state that sanctions them as a private for-profit entity to operate out there in the general public for the welfare of good people. The problem is that there are some bad cops out there and sheriffs and whatever else. All there's everywhere where there's people, okay? Fraternities too, churches too. All right. But what the problem is that they don't study the law. They study traffic safety, codes and regulations for their members when you register your vehicle or yourself to them or to one of their subservient agencies. This does not mean that you're above the law. What it means is that if you're operating under the Constitution, because here's something courts don't like. The Constitution, the Declaration, and the Bill of Rights, these are the superior laws in this nation, not the municipality, not the state. These, they all agreed when they took their oath of office to these documents first. Anytime they stray away from these, it's only because either you're operating as a member of theirs, but they have no right to deny you of your rights. This is learning the law on the legal level. So when you've been doing this for almost 40 years instead of 9 months, you might know a couple of things. And I guess you could call me a YouTube lawyer if you want, but when judges have been asking me to join them, police officers come to me in their private capacity and want to know if they can do some of these things. Judges don't like me because I've beaten them, lawyers too, counties, child support. It is what it is, right? See, guys, it's not personal. This is what you guys used to tell me a long time ago. It's not personal, it's just business. Take your emotions out of it. With that being said, guys, welcome to the Badwolf channel. This is Badwolf Unincorporated. And today we're going to be talking about the doctrine of ultra vires. What is it? Do you need to know it? I think you might find this video most entertaining. As always, guys, yes, you guys can find out all information about me on blackside32.com, jamesclovett.com, or badwolfunincorporated.com. It'll all take you to the same place. On there, you can find everything from donating, which you can also go to my YouTube channel and subscribe to the Wolf Pack by clicking the join and then supporting me monthly at whatever level you want. The lowest one is $1.99. I think literally we only make like 50 cents out of that or whatever else. But every little 50 cents helps. I'm not like other people out here trying to wax you and charge exuberant amounts of money. You know, hell, I've got students now who charge more than me. All right. My focus is getting this knowledge out. And if you guys can help me out with that, that'd be great. If not, at least hit that bell, like, subscribe, and share the videos, or at least, study them on your own so that you can stand on the law the appropriate way and not be a belligerent or combatant. With that being said, what else is there? We have tons of free files and some new free files on there. Join the newsletter on blackside32.com if you guys want any exclusives or files or any other things like that, updates or private information, or to join certain groups that are in the private, because we want to try to keep out scam artists and naysayers and YouTube lawyers and whatever else. So let's get into it. As always, guys, have an awesome day. May whatever God you believe in have mercy on your soul and protect you in all of your things. And hopefully you guys are light seekers. Just do your best every day. Sometimes just check your ego. A lot of times we think we're good or we're on top of it. If you say that, yeah, I'm all good, then why are you still like having problems? Like you need to understand that like sometimes you have to adjust your happiness in life. Sometimes you have to let go of some things, but not forget. Go easy on yourself, but at the same time, sit down and give yourself good counsel. What if you looked at your life and how you treat people, how you say things, and how you expect people to do all these things for you? If you removed yourself from first person and put yourself in third person, and you looked at yourself as if this person was your child or your best friend or your best friend's child, what advice would you give them? Meaning, what advice would you give essentially yourself? I tell this to females all the time who are, some are out here running wild and just feral and doing whatever else, right? And I say, well, okay, well, this is how you're going through it with this dude or whatever else. And remember, not all males are men. It's like not all females are women. There's a difference. So I say, well, what advice would you give your daughter if she was being treated the way you're being treated? Huzzah! All of a sudden, good answers come out of this person. Or I'll tell her, if you have a son and your son was being treated the way you treat some of these dudes, what advice would you give him? It's amazing how we can find a lot of good advice if we take ourselves out of the equation, remove the ego, and then go, what advice would you give somebody in your exact position? It's interesting. It's that do as I say, not as I do. But anyway, I digress. Um, Now that I'm on vacation and I'm taking a brain relaxer over all this stuff, um, I'm going to be on my two other channels. So if you haven't added me on there, please do add me because I'm going to go in deep like. Yes, you can take that however you want to. Take that, take that, take that, take that. And the one is Bad Wolf, the Bad Wolf Media channel, and the other one is Bad Wolf Unlimited on YouTube. All right, just starting them. They're growing, and I haven't put a whole lot of videos on there. I've been trying to get support first from you guys, but it's gonna get good. All right, because we're gonna tackle all kind of issues. some of y'all may like me on this channel. You may not like me on another channel because I'm going to be hurting feelings. This is business over here. Over there, we're going to be talking about real issues. We're going to be talking about stars. We're going to talk about ghosts. We're going to talk about all these things that people say you shouldn't talk about. We're going to talk about Atlantis. I'm going to bring friends, family, other people on the shows. It's going to get good. So anyway, let's go. I know this is what you guys came to see, so let's make it hot. Alrighty. Where you at though? There it is. All right, here we go. Hopefully I can get the lovely AI to read all of this for me because people are just weird. People are weird. It's like I live on the corner, okay, for those most of you guys hopefully don't know that. But for whatever reason, and there's a huge park across the street where people can walk their dogs and let them poop and whatever else, but people just like to walk back and forth past my house. So either they're more government agents, imagine that, um, or there's like an invisible bother this guy, this house X, because I've got cameras. For those people who don't know, matter of fact, I'll show you guys. So there you go. So I keep track of every aspect around here with off-site backups and whatever else. Why? Because I don't trust people. I don't trust anybody, really. Let me be honest. So whether that's whatever, this, that, and the other, yes. All right. So, all right, finally got it ready to rock and roll. Let's jump into this. Shazam. All right. So let's start off here.
The doctrine of ultra vires, Latin for beyond the powers, is a legal principle that holds that an entity, such as a corporation or a government body, cannot act beyond the scope of power granted to it by law, its constitution, or its charter. If it does, those acts are considered ultra vires and therefore invalid or void.
Now it's important to know this because what they're saying, and to the person out there who said they didn't like my commentary in my own videos, it's cute. I remember my first beer. Like, bro, I don't give a rat. Let's get back to it. In other words, I don't care. But moving on. Um, they're telling you here that corporations and government cannot act beyond the scope of their power. Why can't they do that? Because we created the government. The government governs us by our consent, and this is in the Constitution. You can read it. Government by consent. What is his name? John Darash wrote a book on it. We created the government. They governed us by our consent. The government then allowed for corporations, which are also dead entities. Corp is Latin for body. Oration is to animate. So I cannot be governed by a dead thing. A dead body is not my master. Unless I agree to be its employee, or I agree by contract, or I agree by verbal agreement, or I agree by acquiescence to their claim or their request. That is how it works. Let's keep going.
ChatGPT. Share. Balance scale in different contexts. 1. Corporate law. A company is created with certain objects or purposes, outlined in its Memorandum of Association, or Articles of Incorporation. If the company acts outside those stated purposes, the action is ultra vires. For example, if a corporation chartered to operate a bakery starts operating a nightclub, that might be ultra vires. 2. Administrative/constitutional law. A government agency or public authority must act within the powers granted by statute. If it takes actions or makes regulations beyond its legal authority, those actions are ultra vires and can be struck down by a court. There are two types. Substantive ultra vires, when the action itself exceeds the authority. Procedural ultra vires, when the correct legal procedure isn't followed. The doctrine protects individual rights by ensuring that no body can exercise power that hasn't been lawfully granted.
Come on, you can do it. You're a big girl now.
It also keeps corporations and public bodies accountable to their legal framework. Want to see how this doctrine applies in trust law, court jurisdiction, or any specific situation you're working on? Yes, court jurisdiction. And where can this doctrine be found? Under what authority does it have? The doctrine of ultra vires plays a crucial role in court jurisdiction by ensuring that courts and other authorities only exercise powers explicitly granted to them by law. If a court or judicial body acts outside its prescribed jurisdiction, its actions can be challenged as ultra vires. Court jurisdiction and ultra vires. Court jurisdiction refers to the authority of a court to hear and decide cases. Courts are granted jurisdiction based on statutory law, laws passed by legislatures. Constitutional authority, provisions in the Constitution defining the scope of judicial power. Common law, principles that have been established through judicial decisions over time. If a court or tribunal acts outside its jurisdiction, for example, by hearing a case that falls outside its territorial jurisdiction or exceeds the scope of matters it is authorized to address, the action may be ultra vires. Examples of ultra vires in court jurisdiction. Exceeding subject matter jurisdiction. A court may only have jurisdiction over certain types of cases, such as criminal or civil matters, or cases involving specific laws or issues, e.g., family law, bankruptcy. If a court hears a matter outside those subject areas, it may be acting ultra vires. Exceeding territorial jurisdiction. A court can only exercise jurisdiction over matters within its territorial boundaries.
Okay, so you have to understand something, because as somebody who battles my city on countless stupid things like where I can and cannot put certain piles of wood on my own property, or where the garbage cans can and cannot go. Yeah, that's a thing. What they mean by territorial boundaries, which means in the state of Florida or Arkansas or wherever the hell I might be, because states are all basically dicks. There's two sets of things going on here. The physical landmass known as Florida State or Florida is the republic, is the people. State of Florida is the paper numbered jurisdiction over the same exact geographical area. So their territory is any body or anything that is plugged into their numbered papered world, the public, in that geographical area. It then becomes their territory. But not everything in that same physical area is theirs. That's why there's also things like the federal court. Federal court in that same geographical area controls all things that are plugged into it. Federal matters, which can be U.S. citizen, can be national, can be government, can be municipal officers, can be sometimes private things. That's why they say, oh, you have to take that to federal court, or you have to take that to state court. Oh, that's a private matter. Depending on what event is taking place and the subject matter, that which has happened in the event, will plug into one of those things. Or if it contains something that could be considered a federal matter, and you know this, you can remove it from the lower courts, which are nisi prius, and plug that whole thing and take them and the whole matter to the federal court or the Supreme Court. This is what they don't want you to know. All right, let's keep going.
Boundaries. If it rules on a case that pertains to a region or a state where it has no authority, its decision may be ultra vires. Procedural ultra vires. A court must follow specific procedural rules. If it bypasses statutory requirements or procedural safeguards, e.g., issuing an order without proper notice, it may be considered ultra vires. Where the doctrine is found and its authority. Statutory law and constitutions. The primary authority for the doctrine of ultra vires in court jurisdiction comes from statutory law and constitutional provisions. For example, in the U.S., the U.S. Constitution grants the federal courts jurisdiction over specific matters, e.g., Article 3 establishes the judicial power of the U.S. and sets limits on their authority. Federal and state statutes often define the jurisdiction of courts and administrative agencies. Common law. The common law also plays a significant role in the development of ultra vires doctrine. Courts have long relied on judicial precedent to determine the limits of their own jurisdiction and the actions of public authorities. When a court acts beyond the scope of its authority, it can be considered a violation of the common law principle of jurisdictional limits. Judicial review. In many countries, the doctrine of judicial review allows courts to assess whether actions taken by other branches of government or public authorities, including courts, are within their legal powers. If a court's action is ultra vires, a higher court can invalidate the action. Administrative law. In the context of administrative law, courts can use the ultra vires doctrine to review the actions of government agencies, holding them accountable for exceeding their statutory authority. Notable cases and precedents. The doctrine has been affirmed in many key cases. For example, in United States v. Lopez, 1995, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled that the federal government exceeded its authority by passing laws unrelated to commerce, affirming the limits of judicial power and the doctrine of ultra vires. Authority. Constitutional and statutory authority defines and limits the jurisdiction of courts and tribunals. Judicial precedents and the doctrine of judicial review provide the framework for determining when a court has acted ultra vires. In summary, courts have authority only to act within the limits established by law. If they exceed this authority, whether in terms of subject matter jurisdiction, territorial limits, or procedure, their actions are ultra vires and can be challenged or invalidated. Would you like more specific examples or case law references based on your legal work? What about INE case or persona jurisdiction? In rem and personam jurisdiction are two distinct types of jurisdiction that courts must have in order to render valid decisions.
Okay. Pay attention. In rem is property. Personam is the person. Do they have jurisdiction over your property, and do they have jurisdiction over you? Listen closely to what they're saying here, or what she's saying here.
Decisions, especially in civil cases. If a court lacks either of these types of jurisdiction, its actions may be considered ultra vires and thus invalid. Here's how the doctrine of ultra vires applies to both. 1. In rem jurisdiction, jurisdiction over property. In rem jurisdiction refers to the court's authority over property rather than a person. A court within rem jurisdiction has the power to adjudicate rights related to property, even if the parties involved are not physically present in the jurisdiction.
Okay, so first of all, the word adjudicate means to judge. Okay? And they're saying here that if your property is in their area and you're physically somewhere else in Tahiti with me hanging out, drinking some Mai Tais, they can still adjudicate your property, or that's whatever's going on with it, if they have in rem jurisdiction, meaning jurisdiction over your property.
Jurisdiction. Example, a court in one state can hear a case about real estate located within its jurisdiction, even if the property owner resides in another state or country. Ultra vires application. If a court claims in rem jurisdiction over a piece of property outside its territorial boundaries or over property that does not fall under its authority, e.g., a foreign asset or a piece of property governed by another state's laws, its actions could be ultra vires, as it would be exceeding its legal authority. 2. In personam jurisdiction, jurisdiction over the person. In personam jurisdiction refers to the court's authority to make decisions regarding a specific person or party. For a court to have in personam jurisdiction over an individual, certain requirements must typically be met, such as physical presence within the jurisdiction, consent to the court's authority, for example, by voluntarily appearing before the court, minimum contacts within the jurisdiction, as outlined by the International Shoe Company v. Washington case, which means the person or entity must have sufficient ties to the forum state to justify the court's jurisdiction over them. Ultra vires application. If a court attempts to assert in personam jurisdiction over a person or entity that does not have sufficient contacts with the jurisdiction or does not consent, its actions may be ultra vires. For example, if a California court attempts to exercise in personam jurisdiction over a business entity that is located exclusively in Florida and has no meaningful ties to California, it would likely be exceeding its jurisdictional authority, making its decision ultra vires.
You ain't got the power. Got the power. What they're saying here, they're saying, look, you can only exercise authority like public administration over public things and things that are yours. Like I told my city and county, you don't own my property. I will take you to federal court over it. I'll sue you all day. I'll go for 1% of your gross income. Think I'm kidding? Think it's the first time I had this battle? Saying my first rodeo, because I understand this. Now, what they could have done, and maybe they thought, because they tend to assume, is that my property was still underneath my legal person name, which is in their domain. But it's not. Whoopsie. So what that mean, though? What does it all mean, Basil? It means that when my property was registered underneath my legal name, which was my given name and private, was then made public, registered to them to be able to vote, when I should have bought the house and put it into my trust name and not my name, and my name being registered to them, they then have authority over it because my name became a public thing. It became a member of theirs like a suit. And I put that suit on. So now everything that I keep in that suit's name or attached to that suit is also then underneath their jurisdiction. But if I pull it out of my name, it's no longer, and then put in the trust name is not registered to them, then guess what? They don't have jurisdiction. Let's keep going.
Doctrine of ultra vires and personal jurisdiction. Personal jurisdiction is primarily based on the principle of fairness and due process under the 14th Amendment, in the U.S., meaning a court can't exercise authority over someone who does not have sufficient connections to the forum state.
Hold on. This right here is why I tell you guys to minimize your public contacts. This is why I tell you, do not get a bank account for your trust that is interest bearing. You are this right here, this condition, you are satisfying the 14th Amendment. They cannot exercise authority over someone who does not have sufficient connections in the forum state or in the public. When you do this, which is why it's harder for a police officer or a judge or whatever, to my police officer friends out there, who contact me and like, hey, can I do this? This is why I say you cannot do certain things, because you are in fact a 14th Amendment, because every day you're going to work where you swore that you were a U.S. citizen, a public person, but you still have the right to do some of these things. You just have to do them slightly differently. This right here. This is also why they cannot tax you. If you are not, if you have everything in your name and it's been registered to them, then you are considered a public person underneath that name. So you create a new name and a new thing, and you run your business or money compensation through it. It becomes what's known as a pass through, and you're good to go. It's not taxable. They can only tax, ticket, tow, and attack that which is in their forum state on paper. Are you hearing this? Y'all feeling me? Let's go.
State. If a court tries to assert in personam jurisdiction without having a legal basis for doing so, such as lack of notice, minimal contacts, or consent, its actions would be ultra vires. This is because a court is acting beyond its granted powers by asserting authority over someone who should not fall under its jurisdiction. Similarly, for in rem jurisdiction, if the court attempts to adjudicate rights to property that is located outside of its jurisdictional boundaries or fails to provide proper notice to all interested parties, which would violate the due process rights of those individuals, its action would also be ultra vires.
Okay. If the court attempts, so this goes for anybody, the court or the city, they attempt to judge over your property. And when they say located outside of its jurisdictional boundaries, now they're not saying physical boundaries, because your property is within their physical boundaries, but their jurisdictional, is it on paper? And is your house mentioned? We'll just use that with a zip code. Then it's in their jurisdiction. Same thing for the person. You can physically be in the same area that you share with them, but at the time of your encounter, were you operating in the public, the private? Driver's license, well, that would be theirs. Passport, not theirs. Government's, but not theirs. And if a police officer, sheriff, or anybody else looks you up while you're using your passport with a different with your same name to try to find you, that's forcing joinder. That's a federal offense. It is fraud. It is identity theft. You are who you are by what you present. ID, identification, ID stands for identification document. That is who you are in the formal.
Vires. Key legal precedents. International Shoe Company via Washington, 1945. This case established the minimum contact standard for personal jurisdiction, emphasizing that a court must have a sufficient connection with the defendant or the matter at hand to exercise authority over it. Penhoyer v. Neff, 1877, a key case that established the principle that a court cannot assert jurisdiction over a person unless they are physically present within the jurisdiction or have consented to it. Schaefer v. Heitner, 1977. This case reinforced that in rem jurisdiction over property located in the forum state does not automatically give a court jurisdiction over the individual, especially if the individual has no personal contacts with the state.
Did you hear that? So when you guys see case law, okay, case law means that they've already ruled on it in the higher courts, like the federal or the Supreme Court. Those become law. We've ruled on it. This is what it is. The lower levels are the trash ones. Those are the Nisi Prius. If you don't know what that word means, look it up. Gem drop. All right. So they're saying they've already ruled that you don't have jurisdiction just because someone's physically in the area. Same thing for a police officer. You do not have jurisdiction over everybody. Matter of fact, in your books, they're referred to as foreign nationals. A foreign national is the same thing as a private citizen. Now, that doesn't mean that those people are above the law. Doesn't mean you can do whatever the hell you want. But it means if you're not bothering anybody, you're not doing anything criminal, you're not there for their statutes and codes to be bound to you. Doesn't mean you can just jaywalk anytime or do any kind of crazy stuff. It's not what I'm saying. I'm saying if you're not bothering or hurting anything, they are generally to only give you a warning, hey, don't do it like that or whatever, and leave you be. You haven't hurt anybody. You're not doing anything actually criminal. Statutes and codes are for U.S. citizens, which are generally members of the District of Columbia, police officers, postal workers, people who operate in the public on behalf of the public and the private people in general.
When the doctrine of ultra vires applies. In personam jurisdiction, if a court issues a judgment against a person or entity that does not have sufficient contact with the jurisdiction, the judgment may be invalid because the court acted ultra vires. For example, if a state court attempts to adjudicate a dispute involving a foreign individual who has no ties to that state, the court's action would likely be ultra vires. In rem jurisdiction, if a court asserts jurisdiction over property that is outside its jurisdictional reach, e.g., property located in another country or state, this could also be considered ultra vires.
All right, so one of the things I'm going to be doing with my property, which other people have done, is you can register or record your property in another state. Give them the jurisdiction over it. Let's say, like, I think Montana has like no taxes. And then that would mean like Arkansas then can't charge me tax. My property is outside of theirs. So just wait until you guys see what I'm all doing with the property. I'm going to have a video on it. It's going to be good. Probably be a seminar one. It's going to be fire. I'm going to give you guys all the methods, all the gems, all the gold you can carry about this piece. Yay. Let's keep going.
Vires. Authority for the doctrine.
So I asked it, I said, where does the authority come for this ultra vires? Because in case I use this in court, I want to be able to say, well, the power of this comes from where? Okay, so I'm showing you guys here my process in learning and in ambiguify. Sorry, I just had to throw that word in there. Because you have to be able to back up or stand on your square as far as where the power comes from. First of all, it comes from we the people, and it's supported and depicted by the Constitution, because all of them are then subservient to the Constitution. They can say, oh, well, we don't believe in constitutional law or common law. We don't use that here. We don't use case law. It's all statutory law. Law for statutes. Laws for statues. Statues. Dead things that they can control and maneuver as they see fit. Well, I'm not a statue. Let's keep going.
Constitutional law, both U.S. constitutional law, specifically the Due Process Clause of the 14th Amendment, and state constitutions generally set the framework for personal jurisdiction. Statutory law, most jurisdictions have rules of civil procedure, such as Federal Rules of Civil Procedure, Rule 4 for personal jurisdiction, and similar statutes at the state level that define how jurisdiction is to be applied. Case law, as noted, significant cases such as International Shoe, Penhaye v. Neff, and others set precedents for the limits of personal jurisdiction and the idea that actions outside those limits are ultra vires. Summary. The doctrine of ultra vires applies to both in rem and in personam jurisdiction when a court acts beyond its granted authority. In personam jurisdiction, a court must have sufficient minimum contacts with a person or entity for jurisdiction to apply. If a court asserts jurisdiction without these contacts, it can be considered ultra vires. In rem jurisdiction, a court must have authority over the property involved, and if it overreaches by attempting to claim jurisdiction over property beyond its reach, that action can be ultra vires. If you're working on a legal document involving jurisdictional challenges or questioning the validity of a court's action, applying the ultra vires doctrine to jurisdictional issues might help ensure due process and defend constitutional rights effectively. Let me know if you need more detailed case references or a deeper dive into a specific jurisdictional challenge. 4.0 Mini. Can this go for the city or county if the property is held private or foreign government owned? Yes.
Now, obviously, you guys know why I asked this, dealing with my city and county, because my government owns my land and it's held in a private trust, considered a religious trust. So let's see what Big Brain here has to say.
Yes, the doctrine of ultra vires can apply to a city or county, or any other governmental body, if the property involved is privately held or owned by a foreign government and the local government attempts to act beyond its jurisdictional powers. Here's how it can play out in both situations. 1. Private property. Local government authority. A city or county government generally only has authority over real property within its geographic jurisdiction. If the property is privately held, the local government typically can't impose actions like zoning changes, taxes, or seizures unless it has clear legal authority. Ultra vires application. If a local government attempts to exercise control over private property beyond its territorial jurisdiction or without proper authority, e.g., trying to seize property that is outside its area of legal influence, such actions would be considered ultra vires. This could happen in the following scenarios. A county government attempting to impose taxes or fees on property located in another county or state. A city government trying to seize or condemn property owned by a private entity outside its jurisdiction or without due process, e.g., improper eminent domain action. In these cases, the actions of the local government would exceed its granted authority, and individuals or entities could challenge the actions as ultra vires. 2. Foreign government-owned property. Sovereign immunity and jurisdiction. When property is owned by a foreign government, the principle of sovereign immunity typically applies. Sovereign immunity prevents governments from being sued or having their property subject to the jurisdiction of foreign courts, except under specific conditions. Local government acting ultra vires. If a city or county attempts to exercise control over property owned by a foreign government, such as attempting to seize it through eminent domain, impose taxes, or otherwise interfere with its use, it would likely exceed its legal powers. International law and treaties. Under international law, e.g., the Foreign Sovereign Immunities Act, FSA, in the U.S., foreign government property is usually immune from local court actions or governmental seizures unless specific exceptions apply, such as commercial activities conducted within the jurisdiction. Therefore, if a local government attempts to interfere with or seize foreign government-owned property, those actions would typically be ultra vires, as they would be acting outside the scope of their authority. Such actions could be challenged on the basis of lack of jurisdiction over foreign property, violations of international agreements or treaties that govern sovereign immunity and foreign government property rights. For example, if a local government in the U.S. tried to seize or tax a building owned by a foreign embassy, that would likely be challenged as ultra vires because the local government does not have the authority to take such actions under international law and sovereign immunity principles. Relevant legal principles. Property rights. Local governments generally cannot exercise authority over property outside their jurisdiction. In the case of private property, the government would need legal authorization, e.g., zoning laws, eminent domain, etc., to act on the property. Any action outside this legal authority is ultra vires. Sovereign immunity. Foreign government property. Local governments cannot typically assert jurisdiction over property owned by a foreign government due to sovereign immunity unless there is a specific waiver of immunity or commercial activity exception. actions against foreign government property would likely be ultra vires if they violate these immunity principles. Jurisdictional limits. The doctrine of ultra vires ensures that local governments are restricted to acting within their legal and territorial boundaries. Overstepping those limits, whether regarding private property or foreign-owned property, would constitute an action beyond their lawful powers. Examples. Private property example. A city tries to condemn private property outside its city limits for a public project, e.g., constructing a road that crosses into another county. This would be ultra vires because the city does not have authority over property beyond its jurisdiction. Foreign government-owned property example. A county attempts to tax or seize a building that is owned by a foreign government, like an embassy. Under international law and principles of sovereign immunity, this action would be ultra vires because the county lacks authority to act on property belonging to a foreign government. Conclusion. The doctrine of ultra vires ensures that a city or county cannot exceed its legal powers over private or foreign government-owned property. If the local government tries to act beyond its authority, whether by attempting to seize, tax, or otherwise interfere with such property, the action can be challenged as ultra vires, particularly when the property is privately owned and outside the local government's jurisdiction. The property is owned by a foreign government and protected by sovereign immunity. Such actions could be invalidated through legal challenges, including those based on lack of jurisdiction or violations of international law. If you're working with a case or document that touches on any of these issues, you can use the ultra vires doctrine to challenge improper actions by a city or county government. Would you like further guidance on this or need help with a particular scenario? What are all of your courses of legal and/or lawful actions when a judge, court, and separate section after city?
Okay, so let's back up real quick. I found that to be most intriguing. All right, so what they're really saying here is that unless the city, with its own money, or the county, or the state, has taken over a derelict property, or has purchased the property, it's not theirs. However, legally, because once again, we study things on the legal level, if you bought the house with your legal name is registered to them, so that puts you underneath them, to be able to vote. Oh, you didn't know that, huh? You didn't know that voter registration and all those public contacts you had were traps to lure you into the van with candy, and you didn't know P. Diddy was driving? Too soon? Too soon? Okay, sorry. But that's what it is. So through registration with your name, that's how they can assume, which makes an ass out of you and me, they have some jurisdiction here. But your property is not actually public, but because your name is, your property technically is. And if it's public, they believe it's either theirs or you're making money on it for profit. This is why they tax you. They're saying you're making money on your property or with your property. You're a public member, your name is, then by that joinder, so then is your property, and we want to be paid. That's how they get you. Got you bit. Let's get back to it.
City and county supersede their power by means of the doctrine of ultra vires? When a judge, court, or local governmental body, such as a city or county, exceeds its legal authority, ultra vires, there are several legal and lawful actions that can be taken to challenge or remedy the situation. Here's a comprehensive guide to the potential courses of action. 1. Judicial review. What it is: judicial review is the process by which a court examines the actions of a government body, including judges, courts, and local governments, to ensure that those actions are within the bounds of the law and the Constitution. Action: if a court, judge, or governmental body has acted ultra vires, you can seek judicial review of the decision in a higher court or an appellate court. This allows the higher court to determine whether the lower court or governmental body exceeded its jurisdiction. How it works. Filing a petition. You can file a petition for judicial review, specifically challenging the legality of the action taken by the judge, court, or local government. Standard of review. Courts will generally look at whether the action was taken within the scope of the authority granted by law, e.g., statutory law, constitutional principles, or common law. When to use. Judicial review is particularly useful when you believe the judge or governmental body made an error in jurisdiction or overstepped its powers. It's often the first step before filing further appeals. 2. Appeal. What it is. If a judge or court has issued a ruling that exceeds its jurisdiction or authority, you can appeal the decision to a higher appellate court. This challenges the correctness of the lower court's exercise of jurisdiction or its actions in an ultra vires manner. Action: file an appeal with the appropriate appellate or circuit court. The appellate court will review whether the lower court had jurisdiction over the case or exceeded its powers. How it works. Filing notice of appeal. This initiates the process of challenging the decision. Briefs and oral arguments. You will submit legal briefs arguing the ultra vires issue, and the appellate court may schedule oral arguments. Appellate court decision. The appellate court can reverse or vacate the judgment if it finds that the lower court acted beyond its jurisdiction or authority. When to use. When you are seeking to have a higher court correct a lower court's decision that is ultra vires or outside its jurisdictional limits. 3. Motion to vacate or set aside judgment. What it is. If a court has rendered a judgment outside of its jurisdiction, ultra vires, you can file a motion to vacate or motion to set aside the judgment. This is an immediate action that asks the court to annul its judgment on the grounds that the court had no authority to issue it. Action: a motion to vacate can be filed directly in the court that issued the ruling, requesting that the judgment be set aside because the court acted outside its legal powers. How it works. Grounds: you will argue that the judgment is invalid because the court exceeded its jurisdiction or acted ultra vires. Court decision: the judge will determine whether to grant or deny the motion. If granted, the judgment is overturned. When to use. This is particularly effective when you want to challenge the validity of a judgment without waiting for an appeal or judicial review. It is often used when you can demonstrate that the court had no jurisdiction from the outset. 4. Petition for writ of mandamus. What it is. A writ of mandamus is a court order directing a lower court, judge, or governmental body to perform an action required by law. You can seek a writ of mandamus if a judge or court refuses to act or has acted beyond its lawful authority. Action: petition a higher court for a writ of mandamus to compel the lower court or governmental body to correct or reverse an action taken ultra vires. How it works. File the petition. You petition a higher court to issue a writ that forces the lower court or body to act within its jurisdiction. Requirements: the action must be within the higher court's power to compel, and you must demonstrate that there is no other adequate remedy, e.g., appeal. When to use. When you need to compel a lower court or governmental body to act properly and within its jurisdiction, or to prevent them from taking further ultra vires actions. 5. Declaratory judgment action. What it is. A declaratory judgment is a court's ruling on the legal rights of the parties involved in a dispute. You can file for a declaratory judgment when there's uncertainty about a court or governmental body's jurisdiction or the legality of an action it has taken. Action: file for a declaratory judgment to seek an official determination that the actions of the judge, court, or governmental body were ultra vires and that their exercise of power was unlawful. How it works. Request for clarity. You ask the court to clarify whether the actions of the judge, court, or governmental body were within the scope of its legal authority. Outcome: if the court finds that the actions were ultra vires, it will issue a declaration that invalidates those actions. When to use. This action is useful when you need an official determination of jurisdiction and legality, especially when the ultra vires actions involve ambiguity or confusion over the legal scope of the actions. 6. Constitutional or statutory challenge. What it is. If a court or local government action is ultra vires because it violates constitutional principles or statutory law, you can challenge the action directly on constitutional grounds, e.g., due process under the 14th Amendment, equal protection, etc., or assert that the action violates specific statutory limits. Action. File a lawsuit challenging the ultra vires actions based on constitutional violations or violations of federal or state statutory law. This can include civil rights actions under Section 1983 in the U.S. How it works. Challenge in court. You argue that the judge, court, or governmental body's actions violated your rights under the Constitution or specific laws. Injunction or damages. Depending on the case, you can seek an injunction to stop further ultra vires actions or demand damages for any harm caused by the invalid actions. When to use. This action is most appropriate when ultra vires actions violate fundamental rights or breach specific legal statutes or constitutional protections. 7. File a complaint with oversight bodies or regulatory agencies. What it is. Many courts and governmental bodies are subject to oversight by regulatory agencies, ombudsmen, or other official bodies. If you believe a local government or court has overstepped its legal bounds, you can file a complaint with these entities. Action. Depending on the jurisdiction, you can file complaints with an oversight board, a judicial ethics body, or a government accountability office that investigates complaints about abuse of power. How it works. File a complaint. You provide documentation and evidence showing that the actions were ultra vires. Investigation. The oversight body will investigate and, if warranted, take action to remedy the issue, such as reprimanding officials, issuing corrective orders, or referring the matter to a higher court or legislative body. When to use. This approach is useful for holding government bodies and judges accountable when they overstep their jurisdiction and abuse their power. 8. Challenge through private or public interest lawsuit. What it is. If the actions taken by a local government or court have caused harm or violate the law, you can file a private lawsuit or public interest lawsuit to challenge the ultra vires actions and seek relief. Action. You can file a tort action or equitable action, such as an injunction, in a court, asking for the invalidation of the ultra vires action. How it works. Lawsuit. The court will hear the case and can issue a judgment, often ordering remedies like stopping further illegal actions, invalidating past actions, or awarding damages. When to use. This option is suitable when other remedies, e.g., appeals, are unavailable or if you are seeking immediate relief from an unlawful action. Conclusion. When a judge, court, or local government exceeds its authority through ultra vires actions, you have several courses of legal and lawful actions to remedy the situation. These range from filing for judicial review, appealing the decision, seeking a writ of mandamus, filing motions to vacate or set aside judgments, challenging on constitutional or statutory grounds, or leveraging oversight and regulatory bodies. Each action depends on the nature of the ultra vires act, the body involved, and the specific jurisdiction. The key is to act promptly and strategically to protect your rights and ensure the proper functioning of the legal and governmental systems. Would you?
Yes, I would. There it is, guys. Once again, from your armchair YouTube lawyer. I don't know. The AIs can read the law. I've been doing what the AI has been doing, better in most cases, for years. So, sticks and stones to many naysayers and to the quat waffle goblins, haters. It is what it is. Every time you guys stir up my name out there, people come to see who you're talking about, and then they stay. So I'm not really that mad at you. It is the game, right? That being said, to the people who do support me in a positive way, I appreciate each and every one of you guys. And look, we're always going to have a little bit difference of opinion and how the information goes. One of the things that somebody said to me is, well, don't you have to be licensed? There was a time where you didn't have to be licensed, right? What does licensing really mean? Well, it's formal and it's official and it's also public. And you can also do things privately. Everything that they're doing, they took from the private and made a public version. Now, I will say that there is something to being licensed because it means that you've been formally trained in all the ways of that particular law or vehicle or chemical or whatever it is you're licensed in. But hell, you can get a license for marriage. That doesn't mean you're perfect or good at it, now does it? Doesn't mean you also know the ins and outs of your marriage either. Now does it? Doesn't even mean you know all the laws in that state on what must happen when getting a divorce, do you? No. So it is basically saying, well, my system is better than your system. Uh, in some aspects, it may be, but mine may be better or worse in other ways than yours. So do you have to be licensed? No. Anybody who is proficient right now, you could literally go into court and go in pro se if you really wanted to. Doesn't mean you're licensed, but they're saying, well, it's like you are, you just don't have a license, but you can handle yourself. You're proficient enough. So I'm sorry, once again, why does anybody have to be licensed? Well, you need to be licensed in things that are dangerous to you or to people around or transportation thereof. So that's why you should know how to operate your vehicles and whatever else appropriately. But per the Constitution, if you do know how to handle yourself in these things, you're good to go. Unless it's something dangerous and manufactured, then yes, you need to be licensed. And well, hell, we don't want you to have anything like that in the first place. So take care of yourselves, everybody. Just another tool to use as you need, as you see fit, as you were. And look to the light, look to the east, keep your eyes open, be aware of your surroundings and everything that you do. Be careful who you let into your mind, body, soul, family, house, world, thoughts. And that goes for everything because you are, in fact, a product of your environment. And if you're a ninja, well, then you're the master of one's environment and of oneself. Or so they teach. I'll talk to you guys later. Have a good day. And I'm on vacation, but yeah, probably still gonna make some more videos. But a number of them will also be on my other two channels. Remember, the Badwolf Unlimited or Badwolf Unlimited and the Badwolf Media channel. I had to think about it because I'm not usually over there and they're brand new. So new name, same game. I'll talk to you guys later.